would like you to join me in welcoming Marjorie Devlin. Margie holds an MBA in marketing and has worked in sales, marketing, and workforce development. She has managed training programs for an international training firm, a career and technical high school, and Penn State University. As a former education program manager at Penn State Abington's Department of Continuing Education, where she evaluated and managed certification programs for their course portfolio. Today, Margie will be sharing career advancement options, the new continued education, and how certification can take your career to the next level. Please help me welcome Margie.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the new continuing education and how certification can take your career to the next level. I'm Margie Devlin. I'm a program manager with Penn State Abington. We offer certification courses and other types of workforce training for adults. So before we start talking about where we want to head with education, we have to place ourselves right now in the economy that we're in. So the economic situation we're in now is that we've got a global pandemic, we have high unemployment, and we have a lot of students with student debt. And so we see people divided by people who have college degrees and don't have college degrees, and there's a sharp economic divide there. And unfortunately, even some people who don't yet have their college degrees have college debt. So this is really the backdrop for the educational and economic environment that we're in right now. Welcome to the future of work. Here we are. The Strata Institute for the Future of Work is an organization that is an educational think tank that helps us understand where education needs to go to get where we need to be in the future. And they said that to ensure that workers are equipped with the relevant skills and competencies to thrive in the jobs of tomorrow, we must build the infrastructure and systems to help them seamlessly navigate between learning and earning today. So what they're saying is that we need to bridge that gap between education and careers. And we haven't quite done that yet, and this is where we're headed in the future. So the Strata Institute said that the business world has moved 10 years since March of 2020. Do you guys feel that's the right number? Because I know I feel like I've aged 10 years since March. So some people might say it's a little less, but for me, I think that's not a bad metric. We know that we were moving into a digital economy, right? We were moving into what is called the fourth industrial revolution. And that all sped up with the pandemic. We completely accelerated that digital transformation. And now we're sitting here as workers and employers and saying, what do we need to do to get where we need to be? What skills do I need to have as a worker? What skills does my employer need to hire for? So for example, talent was always becoming more about skills. That has sped up dramatically. I work for an educational institution. Our business was educating students in face-to-face environment with a little bit of remote. That model since March has completely flipped. We are now almost all distance education with a little bit of face-to-face. So now my employer is saying, I have people who don't have the skills for what they're doing. I have professors who can't teach remotely who never had to. So what skills do we need to provide our employees to get them where they need to be? What issues are companies facing around attracting and retaining talent? So the first thing they're saying is, what talent do I have in my current employees? And what skills do I need for the future? And can I hire for those skills from outside, or should I train my internal talent? Because sometimes we find that the skills we need aren't even available in the external marketplace. So these are the issues that they're facing. So when we reimagined talent development in 2020, we realized that with large-scale technology disruptions, one of the key factors for organizations is mapping their skills to the new workforce world. And that is not always easy for organizations. That can be a real sticking point because skills don't always map directly. So if you're a manufacturing organization, and let's say you're a tool and die tradesman. Now, the manufacturing organization wants to move to the new skills and wants to become more productive, so they're going to bring in CNC machines and need CNC machinists. That tool and die tradesman can very easily translate his skills to become a CNC machinist. It's a very direct one-to-one relationship on skills. But let's say you're Amazon, and the main type of worker that you have is warehouse workers. But that's not what you need. What you need now is data analysts. And how do you get them? Well, they're not available in the marketplace because it's too much of an in-demand skill right now. So what Amazon did was they started a program, which is a career training program for warehouse workers, to turn them into data analysts. They figured out how to upskill their workers so that they could fill the jobs that they needed while creating a career pathway for other people coming into the company. That's worked pretty well for them. So training is now being designed around skills and competencies and not so much around the degree that people hold. So let's talk about what education has looked like in the past before we take a look at where we're headed. We know that education has always been education institution driven. Universities and colleges decided what types of majors they wanted to offer, sometimes based upon the local workforce area that they were in, but many times based upon the population of professors that they had and the things that they had become over time inherently good at. And they would pump these four-year degreed individuals out into the workforce. It was sort of one size fits all. It was geared for the 18 to 24-year-old, and it was very, very much degree oriented. But who is the student of today? Is that model still working for us? We know the student of today is an older worker, that they have children sometimes, that they are working full or part-time, and that this idea of the post-secondary student being an 18 to 24-year-old, every year we're seeing fewer and fewer 18-year-olds move into the college system. And every year we're seeing more adults move in. But we have to translate our educational environment for these new students because they're not the same students that we've had in the past. They want shorter, more job-focused education. Fewer of them are aiming for degrees. And we know that they will have multiple work transitions over a lifetime. We know that the young people of today are 3 times more likely to change jobs than the baby boomers were. My husband works for the firm that he interned with in college. He's never worked anywhere else. That just doesn't happen anymore. And so now we need to reskill our educational system for these new students. So what is the new continuing education? Well, it's precision education. It is education that is mapped to workforce skills, as we talked about earlier. It is not one size fits all. It is modularized. It very much builds on a student's current skills because we know we have these adult students who are already in the workplace coming in. And we cannot assume that they're a fresh, bright-eyed 18-year-old with no skills. And so in order to get this done in a more timely fashion, we have to give students credit for the knowledge that they already have and employ more competency-based learning techniques than we have in the past. We know it's employer-driven. It's driven directly towards local skills gaps. And the new educational system is able to accommodate changes in industry much better than we have in the past. So as we have these kinds of things like we're living in right now, where a pandemic has really created a distance economy and sped up this digitization of everything, education needs to be able to pump out workers faster for the jobs and the skills that we need. And we know that our students are going to be lifelong learners. We know that the idea that a person goes to college, gets a 4-year degree, and goes into the workforce and never does any retraining is over. Things are changing too fast. Everything is technology driven now. So we need to have more of a workforce and an education system where we can have lifelong learners and continually skill and reskill our workers. Any questions before I get into the idea of credentialing and the new education?
Well, I don't know whether my question is premature, but a lot of the employers now, their baseline education or baseline qualification for a lot of positions is you must have a bachelor's degree.
Yes.
So will that change over time with more students looking more for certifications and specializing? Or is it still going to be, or are the employers far behind in that mindset of the evolution of education?
That's a great question. It depends on the industry, but largely employers are waiving that, that degree requirement. And it's happened more in tech than anywhere else. In tech, they need workers so badly, and the tech skills that the students are coming out with are not always the skills that they need. So they're waiving it much more so in tech, but we are seeing more and more of that. In fact, Google just started their own certification programs and are saying this is going to take the place of a degree. Now, I'm not sure there's a certification that's ever going to take the place of a 4-year degree, but that's how they're framing it right now. And that's their intent for this internal training so they don't have to hire college grads. So what are credentials? The first thing we want to know when we talk about credentials and certifications is that the reason credentials came about was to document worker competencies. So they're trying to document the competencies and skills that a person has to showcase them in the workforce. And there's a number of different types of credentials, and we're going to sort of run through all of these today. The first one is credit-bearing academic certificates, and these are always issued by a college or a university. The second one is a non-credit certificate that can be issued by a training firm or by a university. We've got industry credentials, which were created by industry trade groups. Those are also issued by colleges and universities as well as third-party training firms. And then we have apprenticeships, and these are not your father's apprenticeships. These are quite different than the old tradesman apprenticeships that are still out there and still valid, but they've moved the model into the new workforce. And then we're going to talk about badges and micro-credentials, which is a broader category of credentialing. So before we talk about that, let's talk about the potential for these credentials. What really is the potential for them in the marketplace? Well, Gallup recently did a poll and said that half of workers who have a high school education and a professional certification are in good jobs. So that's good as Gallup defined it by the salary metrics, et cetera. We know that the future jobs that are coming out there are middle skill jobs. These are jobs that are going to require a high school diploma and additional schooling, but not a college degree. That's the new jobs that are coming online now, the vast majority of them. So these professional certifications become more valuable. I think we talked about LinkedIn earlier. LinkedIn has an insiders group for their LinkedIn learning platform. It's their advisors. 60% of those people surveyed said that employers are going to start to hire more on skills than on degrees, to your question, and we think that trend is going to continue. This is a different 60%, but I want to talk about it. The Lumina Foundation is an educational think tank, and it partners sometimes with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They have a goal called 2025, and that goal is to increase the proportion of Americans with high-quality post-secondary credentials to 60% by 2025. So can we get there in 5 years? Well, we have a long way to go. And at the time this data was written, they were not predicting that we'd be quite there yet by 2025, although we're making progress. But the thing is, this is pre-pandemic data. And as I said, everything is changing and people are reskilling quickly. So we could be there by 2025, but that is definitely the goal. All right, so let's talk about what types of credentials there are and sort of break them down into categories so we can really get a sense of them. Well, first you have your educational diplomas and certificates. That's what we do at my university. We offer degree-bearing credentials and certificates, credit-bearing. They don't always lead to a degree, but they can be credit-bearing so you can put them towards a degree. And we offer non-credit-bearing certificates in a given field. There's registered and non-registered apprenticeships. As I said, these are different these days. They are competency-based. Students can move through the apprenticeship much quicker than they could in the past, so they're not time-based like the old journeyman apprenticeship was. They're moving into new fields. There are apprenticeships out there now for teaching. They're moving into the business world. It's a great model. The competency-based apprenticeship is a great model where you're marrying on-the-job training with classroom training and stepping up metrics and salary each time. And so it's still being used out there. It's not a big portion of the training, the certifications that are out there now, but it is important. We have occupational licenses. These are teachers and nurses. These are jobs where when you move or cross state lines, you sometimes have to get relicensed and retrained. Small percentage of the credential marketplace. Industry certifications are issued by third-party industry trade groups. And these are becoming quite popular, and you're going to see a lot more of these in the future. We're going to talk more about these today. And then badges and other micro-credentials are a broader, less defined category, and the purpose of a badge is to demonstrate a narrow range of competencies. And we'll take a look and see what that looks like. What I want to talk about now are the two blue categories, the educational certificates and the industry certifications. Okay, so what's the difference? An industry certification is content designed by industry insiders. It was a group of industry trade group association people who came together and said, we know what it takes to be good at our trade. We know what skills you need and the processes that you need. So if you're the Project Management Institute, I think we're all familiar with their PMP certification, which is a highly valued project management certification. They came together and said, we know the steps to be a good project manager, and we know the skills that a good project manager has. So these trade groups put together course content based upon these skills and their knowledge of their own industry. They then handed it off to educational institutions because they said, that's not our world. We don't want to register students and hold classes. We're going to give that to you, but we own the content. So when you get an industry certification, every person is going through the exact same content, and every person is taking the exact same exam. Now, obviously, the exams change over time because of security reasons, but basically, it's a very similar way of learning. And the test is almost always taken at a third-party testing center for security reasons. An industry certificate is different. An industry certificate is also written by industry experts, but these industry experts are professors. They're people who know the industry through their work in research and their work in the business community, and they say, these are the metrics we think you need to have in order to be good at this profession. So at Penn State, you can get a supply chain industry certification or a digital marketing industry certification. But it's going to differ from institution to institution because the metrics and the content that Penn State thinks are important for digital marketing may not be the same course content that Drexel thinks are important for digital marketing.
Question on that. So on an employer perspective of having a different curriculum with different higher educational institutions, how does that complicate the employer's process on hiring?
It does.
Okay.
Hang on to that question.
Okay.
So there's a number of industry certifications in business. The American Marketing Association partnered with the International Digital Marketing Institute, and they created the DMI Pro, which is an industry digital marketing certification. If you're in marketing and you want a digital marketing certification, that's pretty much the main one out there. Now, the Society for Human Resources Management has a very popular certification called CP, Certified Professional. Almost every major university runs those courses. There's two in Human Resources Management, but that's the most popular one. We talked about the Project Management Professional, and in supply chain, there is a certification called the SC Pro. If you're in marketing and you want a certification, let's say you pick Penn State as your university, you get Penn State's Digital Marketing Certificate, and you can get that from our Great Valley campus or from our Scranton campus. Again, content designed by a group of professors around digital marketing. If you want an industry certification, though, you can go to Penn State Abington and you can get the AMA DMI certification. And you might want to get a micro badge on marketing on a very narrow area, and we'll talk more about those later. Now, if you're in the supply chain industry, you might get a university certificate. In supply chain, they're mostly credit certificates on the graduate level for supply chain, but not always. Or there's industry certifications by several different industry trade groups. And each one of these is a little different, and you need to figure out what skills and competencies you're trying to learn before you pick what industry certification in this industry that has multiple groups. One of them focuses more on transportation, one of them focuses more on purchasing, and one of them is very broad. It covers soup to nuts, kind of like SHRM does for human resources. But what we talk about with the industry certifications is that they have more geographic and employer portability. Because if I get a certification in digital marketing and it's a university certificate from ABC University in Philadelphia and I move to California, My employer says, well, I don't know anything about that university and I don't know what this certificate means. But if I have the American Marketing Association certificate, they know exactly what that means. Okay, so in the field of industry certifications, really certifications kind of grew up in this industry because they're so complex. The skills involved in the technology industry are so complex. And certifications were started to create a common language between workers and employers to talk about what skills you had. So the Computer Technology Industry Association, CompTIA, was formed to create these certifications in all the various areas of technology. So their first certification is the A+ certification. Even if you're not in the technology area, you can move into the field by getting your A+ certification, taking the courses and sitting for the exam. When an employer hires you, they understand exactly what skills you have. And that particular certification can put you to work as a help desk technician. Once you work in that field and you want to move up the career ladder, you might take a Network Plus course and sit for that exam. Now the employer knows you know basic computer, help desk skills, and you also know network assistance skills. And then you move up the ladder. This is called stacking credentials, and it's becoming more and more common as these types of certifications and credentials replace degrees. There's a number of other industry certifications for tech out there. We all know Microsoft and the various certifications that they offer. This is an example of CompTIA's stackable credentials. Recently, they expanded their pool of certifications, and they came up with 2 separate career pathways, one for cybersecurity and one for computer infrastructure. And they mapped out the courses for each career pathway and said, as you take the courses, they call them stackable credentials, and each one of these appears on your resume, and your employer understands exactly where you are on the skills for those jobs. Let's take a look at badges and micro-credentials. This is our friend Joe Samuelson, and this is Joe's resume. Now this might be his LinkedIn profile. What you see here is that he has a number of badges and credentials. The dark colored flags you see there are Adobe credentials. He's certified in various pieces of Adobe software. Microsoft has credentials. He's certified in ethical hacking. You can see these are very narrow competencies that he has these digital badges for. And the digital badge is just taking that paper PDF certificate to the next level. You can't get one of these unless you've completed the course, and they show up on your LinkedIn or on your resume, and the employer knows you have those skills. And what's the purpose of these badges? It's because the degree or the transcript doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't tell the story of all of the different learnings you have, and it can't document for employers the learnings that you have. So that's the purpose of badges and micro-credentials. Now, IBM has one of the most robust digital badging programs in the country, and many of their employees are taking advantage of that. But they're also outside of the tech area. Western Reserve University put together badges for grad school and postdocs. So they said, we realize that these students need soft skills, and they put together courses with badges on them for the soft skills. And they found that the registrations for those courses doubled once they attached a digital certificate to the course. And it's because the student wants to showcase to the employer their skills. All right, so what are the traits of a quality credential? We could talk about this for a long time, but we're just going to touch on it very, very quickly here. When you're looking for a credential, the first thing you want to look for is transparent learning outcomes. And any college or university is going to give you transparent learning outcomes for the courses you take for them. They will lead to further education or employment, and you have to figure out what outcomes you're looking for and what you value. In terms of skills verification, there has to be skills verification associated with a certificate. So that is typically a test. Sometimes it is also a project, as in the case of Lean Six Sigma, where you have to do a project and have work experience and then take the test. So here's 4 metrics for non-degree credential quality measurement. The first thing is design. How is this credential designed, and does this design fit your goals? I'm taking a digital marketing certification right now. It is the American Marketing Association certification that I mentioned. It is fully asynchronous. It's online. I watch videos. I take practice tests. I use their study guides. I love it. It works for me. It's self-paced. I fit it into my schedule. But we have people call us every day and say, I want to take your certification course, but I need to be in a classroom in front of a professor. I learn more that way. I like the interaction with my peers. I want to interact with the professor, and that's how I want to take my credential. That's fine too, but when you're looking at a credential, think about how it's designed. What competencies are taught? Remember, we used the example of supply chain. If you're going into the purchasing track on supply chain, don't take a credential that has the competencies for logistics and transportation. And I have people call me all the time for these credentials and try to sign up, and they don't really know what their goals are yet, and sometimes they're going down the wrong path. And then market processes just says, what does this credential mean in the marketplace? So all credentials have a currency, and that currency says, how is it valued in the marketplace? So if you are a human resources professional and you want to get the SHRM certification, that's very highly valued. I'll give you another example. We wanted to run a supply chain certification. So we found that there's a local trade group that has a very good certification. That certification covers soup to nuts. It's very broad, like SHRM is. And they have an industry group that's local, a users group, and they're very active. They meet all the time. We said, this is perfect. It's a great course. They have a great institution backing them up. We couldn't get the classes to run. Why? Because the credential has no market currency. Employers weren't looking for it. Individuals didn't know about it, and we couldn't gain any interest in it. So if you're going to take the time to get a credential, make sure it's going to be worth your while. And then, of course, outcomes. Is this credential going to let you move on to further education or a career? Before we wrap up, let's just talk about why we should get certified from the standpoint of an individual and from the standpoint of an employer. Well, from the standpoint of an individual, certification shows a deep commitment to professional development. It shows that you are the kind of person that's willing to go the extra mile to take coursework and do exams and projects to prove your competencies. It'll help you stand out in a resume pile. It'll validate your skills so that you look different from other employees who maybe don't have that same skills validation. And as we talked about, it has geographic and employer portability. Credentials mean something. And stackable credentials lead to a particular career. Now, from an employer standpoint, the most important thing is that credentials provide a common language for employers to communicate with workers and for employers to communicate with other stakeholders about their training. If they're talking to the Department of Labor about funding for courses, they need a common language for the skills they're trying to train for. Skills transparency across employees creates less risk on the part of new hires, which is huge for employers. And then, of course, stackability of credentials shows a deepened mastery of skills from one employee to another. So in summary, there are new alternatives to degree-based education. They don't make sense for everybody, but they make a lot of sense in certain areas. Organizations and individuals should always do a skills gap analysis to say, what are my skills and where do I need to go? What are the skills we have in our company and what are we going to need for the future? There's a wide variety of credentials out there, and based upon your needs and your objectives and the way you want to learn are the metrics that you should use to choose a different credential. Most importantly, credentials are designed to document competencies. That's the whole purpose of credentials, and they do that in a couple of ways. They do it with coursework, always a test, sometimes at a testing center, and they can do that with a project or work experience, as in the case of PMP, where you have to have so many years of work experience before you can even sit for the exam. So that's it in a nutshell. Are there any other questions?
I have a question. So what is the role of a 4-year degree fit in? And do you see that fitting with this? Or is something that you see going away? Like how does that come together?
So many people who get credentials have 4-year degrees. Project management and human resources are a great example of that. They have the degree. But the credential lets you sometimes move into the field that you don't have. So you can have, I had somebody call me the other day, at a communications degree from Penn State, and I thought he was calling for the digital marketing certification, but what he wanted was the human resources certification. And that's going to let him move into that field. So the degree is still extremely important. It's just not right for everyone. I have 3 kids. They're all going to get undergraduate degrees and probably masters. It just depends on your field and what you want. The degree is not dying, it's just changing, and we're providing more options for people.
The life skills badge or credentials you were talking about, could you elaborate a little bit more on what those life skills focuses are?
Sure. So those would be soft skills. So those are skills like presentation skills, emotional intelligence, leadership, things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily learn in a degree program. So if you're a biology postdoc and you're interviewing at a pharma company and they're looking at a lot of grad school students who have biology degrees, but you're the one who has a digital credential in leadership and presentation skills, and they say, there's a lot of presenting to stakeholders and funders in this role, we're going to hire that person. So it's just another way to show your learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would like to take a moment to thank our generous sponsors. Through their support, we are able to bring you quality programming and a virtual networking experience. I'd like to thank our corporate sponsors, Philadelphia Federal Credit Union, Parks Casino, TD Bank, Marshall's Distribution Center, Philadelphia. I'd like to thank our executive sponsors, Chorus Services, Holy Family University, Inverse Paradox, Jefferson Health Northeast, Nazareth Hospital, Northeast Family YMCA, PICO, Philadelphia Gas Works, Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, Rivers Casino, St. Basil Academy, and Witham Smith & Brown. I'd also like to thank our media sponsor, Northeast Times, our production sponsor, Viral Ideas Marketing, and our session sponsors, Fast Signs of Northeast Philadelphia. Please take a moment to reach out to our sponsors and share your positive experience as a subscriber of the 2020 Women in Business Conference. Thank you very much for subscribing, and we hope you enjoy our programming.